Radhika, Arjun and Kunal, three lives intertwined by love, betrayal, and secrets, were about to be swept into a shocking chain of events that no one saw coming. What started as ordinary routines in a quiet American city would soon spiral into jealousy, danger, and a near-fatal encounter that would change everything, forever. Please subscribe for daily new update of crime story and watch till end. Radhika Malhotra had always dreamed of living abroad, exploring new cities, and building a successful life with her husband. When she and Arjun moved from Pune to Seattle, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter, filled with hope. The first few months were filled with excitement. They set up their apartment together, tried new foods, visited parks on weekends, and shared long conversations about their future. Everything looked warm and promising, almost like the perfect life they had imagined back in India. But slowly, the glow began to fade. Arjun's new job demanded long hours, endless meetings, and constant deadlines. He left home before sunrise and returned late at night, exhausted and uninterested in anything except sleep. Radhika tried to stay patient, telling herself it was normal for a new job to feel overwhelming. She cooked his favorite dishes, decorated their home, and even planned small weekend outings, hoping to reconnect. But each effort ended the same way. Arjun was too tired, too distracted, or simply uninterested. Living in a foreign country started feeling lonelier than she expected. Radhika had left behind her parents, her friends, and the familiar chaos of her city. In Seattle, everything felt quiet, organized, and distant. She spent most days working remotely and evenings scrolling through old photos, missing the noise and warmth of her old life. Even the weather felt heavy. Long stretches of gray skies made her feel trapped inside her own thoughts. To escape the loneliness, Radhika began taking long walks around the neighborhood. She visited the nearby library often, finding comfort among shelves of books and the calm atmosphere. It became her safe space, a place where she could breathe without feeling the weight of her silent apartment. She would sit by the large windows, watching people pass by, wondering if moving abroad had been a mistake. As weeks passed, Radhika noticed changes in herself. She felt less excited about mornings and more anxious during evenings when she waited for Arjun to come home. Their conversations became shorter. Sometimes they barely shared more than a few sentences a day. Whenever she tried bringing up her feelings or suggesting ways to reconnect, Arjun dismissed it as unnecessary pressure. He believed they were just adjusting to their new life, and that things would naturally improve. But deep inside, Radhika knew something was shifting. She began craving emotional connection, someone to listen to her, understand her, and remind her that she wasn't alone in a foreign world. She didn't want to break her marriage, nor was she searching for anything outside it. She simply needed warmth that she no longer felt at home. Little did she know that this silent longing would open a door she never intended to walk through. A door that would lead her into a complicated world filled with hidden feelings, unspoken fears, and choices that would change her life forever. What felt like a harmless attempt to escape loneliness would soon become the seed of a dangerous story, one that neither she nor Arjun could have ever predicted. One quiet afternoon, while Radhika browsed through the aisles of the library, she paused near the technology section, searching for a book to keep her mind occupied. As she scanned the titles, a book slipped from the shelf and fell at her feet. Before she could bend down to pick it up, someone else reached for it at the same time. It was Kunal, a graduate student, who visited the library almost daily. He smiled politely and handed her the book. Radhika thanked him and walked away, thinking it was just a simple moment shared with a stranger. But over the next few days, she noticed him again, reading by the window, typing on his laptop, sorting through research papers. He seemed focused, calm, and approachable. Their paths crossed often, and eventually, they began offering each other small nods of acknowledgement. For Radhika, it felt comforting to have even that small sense of familiarity in a city where everything felt foreign. One day, while choosing a book on psychology, she saw Kunal searching for the same title. He made a polite gesture, encouraging her to take it first. That single interaction opened the door to a brief conversation about books, studies, and life in Seattle. Radhika learned that Kunal was born in California to Indian parents and was pursuing a specialization in cybersecurity. He spoke about his studies with passion, and his cheerful energy made her feel at ease. She found herself enjoying the exchange more than she expected. Their casual meetings turned into longer discussions inside the library. They talked about favorite authors, cultural differences, and the challenges of living far from extended family. Radhika shared only small details about her life, careful not to reveal too much. She didn't want to think of it as anything more than a friendly connection, and in her heart she believed it was harmless. After all, she had no one else in Seattle to talk to outside of work. As weeks went by, they began sitting at nearby tables during study hours. Sometimes they exchanged book recommendations, and sometimes they simply worked quietly in each other's presence. For Radhika, the quiet companionship felt refreshing. It filled the emotional emptiness she had been experiencing at home. She never imagined it as a bond that could grow deeper, and she convinced herself that she was only seeking company, not affection. On days when Arjun returned late and barely spoke, Radhika found herself thinking about the peaceful hours at the library. She didn't tell Arjun about Kunal, not because she felt guilty, but because she feared he would misunderstand and dismiss it as unnecessary. She believed keeping it private would avoid conflict. But secrecy has a way of turning small actions into dangerous shadows. Radhika didn't realize that her growing attachment to the library visits, and the comfort she found in Kunal's presence, would soon begin changing her choices. What started as a coincidence was slowly becoming a pattern, shaping a connection that neither she nor Kunal fully recognized yet. And somewhere in the background, without her knowledge, the seeds of trouble were being quietly planted. As time moved forward, Radhika and Kunal's meetings began taking on a rhythm of their own. What had once been brief exchanges near bookshelves turned into regular habits. Some days they met without planning, and on others Kunal would send her a simple message, asking if she was coming to the library. Radhika found herself looking forward to those messages. Even though she reminded herself that this was just a harmless connection, she convinced herself that having a friend outside her marriage wasn't wrong, especially when she felt so emotionally isolated at home. They started exploring new places together. Quiet coffee shops, hidden between busy streets, scenic lakesides with walking paths, and cozy corners of the city that reminded them both of India. These outings were innocent in Radhika's mind. She believed she wasn't crossing any boundaries, because she never allowed anything romantic to happen. She simply felt understood for the first time in months. Kunal listened when she spoke, asked about her interests, and encouraged her to pursue hobbies she had abandoned. His presence made her feel visible again. But the secrecy around these meetings was becoming heavier. Whenever Arjun asked about her day, Radhika avoided mentioning Kunal's name. She answered vaguely, saying she spent time reading or going for walks. She didn't want to lie, yet she didn't want to reveal the truth either. She feared Arjun would react sharply or accuse her without reason, and she didn't want to deal with more emotional distance at home. Keeping Kunal a secret felt easier than facing an argument. Arjun, however, had already sensed the shift. He noticed Radhika leaving the house more often, returning with a different kind of energy, lighter, brighter, almost relieved. Her phone buzzed more frequently, and she started being protective of it. She changed her lock screen password, something she had never done before. Even the tone of her voice changed whenever she answered certain texts. Arjun couldn't ignore these signs. Suspicion began creeping into his thoughts, slowly turning into an obsession. One night, unable to sleep, Arjun reached for Radhika's phone while she rested beside him. He waited for the moment when her breathing became steady, signaling deep sleep. Then he quietly unlocked the screen using her fingerprint while pretending to adjust her hand. His heart pounded as he opened her messages. At first, he found nothing alarming. Texts from friends and relatives, work-related notifications, but then he stumbled upon a name he didn't recognize. The frequency of the conversations and the enthusiasm in some of her replies made his mind race. He scrolled through every message, interpreting even the simplest words as evidence of betrayal. Arjun didn't confront her immediately. Instead, he grew silent, colder, and more observant. He started tracking her routines and timings, watching for any unusual behavior. Every day, he collected small pieces of information, convincing himself that Radhika was hiding more than just friendship. His insecurity took over, twisting his thoughts into darker assumptions. Without expressing a single concern to her, he began building a narrative that would soon grow beyond anything he could control. The distance between them, already wide, was on the verge of turning into something dangerous. Arjun's silent suspicion slowly grew into a consuming force that controlled every hour of his day. He tried to behave normally around Radhika, but his eyes followed her every move. He memorized her patterns, what time she left, how long she stayed out, and how she reacted when her phone buzzed. Every small smile she showed while reading a message felt like a sharp wound to his pride. He convinced himself that she was drifting away from him, even though he never asked her a single question about what she was feeling. The more Arjun observed, the more his imagination twisted innocent interactions into threatening ones. He became obsessed with uncovering the truth. He read articles, watched videos, and even scrolled through online forums, trying to understand how people hid relationships. Each piece of information fed his paranoia. All the while, Radhika had no idea that Arjun's quiet glances had turned into careful calculation. One afternoon, Arjun left work early under the excuse of a meeting being cancelled. Instead of going home, he followed Radhika's location using a tracking app he secretly installed on her phone weeks earlier. The app showed her at a lakeside park not far from downtown. Confusion and anger surged through him. She had told him she would be at the library preparing for a work assignment. Seeing a different location marked on the map only strengthened his growing belief that she was hiding something bigger. Driven by a dangerous curiosity, Arjun drove to the park and parked far enough to avoid being noticed. He scanned the area until he spotted her sitting on a bench. Kunal was beside her. They were talking calmly, and although nothing inappropriate happened, Arjun focused only on their closeness. The relaxed way Radhika leaned back, the comfort she seemed to feel, and the effortless way they interacted, all of it felt like unbearable betrayal to him. His hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly that his fingers went numb. He remained in the car for nearly an hour, watching them talk. Every passing minute added fuel to the fire burning inside him. Logic disappeared. Instead of confronting her or seeking clarity, Arjun allowed jealousy to shape a version of the truth that felt more painful than reality. In his mind, he became the victim of humiliation. Imagining the conversations they might have shared, the secrets Radhika might have confessed, and the affection she never showed him anymore. When Radhika finally stood up to leave, Arjun ducked lower in his seat to avoid being seen. He followed her from a distance as she walked toward the bus stop, never noticing the emotional storm brewing in her husband's mind. By the time he reached home, Arjun's jealousy had transformed into quiet rage. He no longer saw Radhika as his partner struggling with loneliness. He saw her as someone who had betrayed him and destroyed the life they had built together. Every thought he had was darker than the last. He felt powerless, like someone watching his marriage collapse while being unable to stop it. This helplessness soon turned into a desire for control, a desire that would push him toward decisions he would have never imagined making just months earlier. The quiet, loving man he once was had begun to fade, replaced by someone blinded by suspicion and resentment, unaware of how far he was about to go. Arjun's mind had become a battlefield of anger, insecurity, and wounded pride. Days passed, but the image of Radhika and Kunal at the lakeside park kept replaying in his thoughts like a scene burned into his memory. Even the smallest triggers, a message notification on Radhika's phone, or the sound of her getting ready to leave the house, felt like sparks, setting off his temper. He convinced himself that she had chosen someone else over him, and every moment he spent imagining their interactions pushed him deeper into dangerous territory. His emotions no longer followed reason, they only followed his fear of being replaced. The more he thought about it, the stronger his desire became to regain control. He believed that if he confronted Radhika openly, she would deny everything and make him feel foolish for doubting her. He didn't want explanations or excuses. What he wanted was an end to the humiliation he believed he was suffering. In his mind, the only way to protect his dignity was to take drastic action. Slowly, the idea of harming her began to form, not as a sudden impulse, but as a thought that grew stronger each day until it felt almost natural. Arjun began preparing in small, careful steps. He researched secluded places near Seattle where hikers rarely visited on weekdays. He read about trails with limited cell network and minimal surveillance. After hours of scrolling through online maps and forums, he chose a quiet hiking route surrounded by dense trees and narrow turns. It was a place where unexpected disappearances wouldn't be questioned immediately. He told himself that no one would suspect him if things were done carefully. One evening, he drove to a nearby store, purchasing a fishing knife under the pretense of wanting to try a new outdoor hobby. He kept his expression neutral while paying, hoping the cashier wouldn't remember him. When he returned home, he hid the knife in the trunk of his car beneath old tools. The weight of the blade felt heavy on his conscience, but instead of making him reconsider, it strengthened his resolve. He believed he was preparing for something necessary, something that would finally put an end to his suffering. In the days that followed, Arjun rehearsed the plan in his mind. He imagined inviting Radhika for a peaceful outing, pretending to mend their relationship. He practiced acting calm so she wouldn't suspect anything. He even planned the route he would take, choosing a time when the trail would be nearly empty. He considered every detail: where he would stop, how he would lure her deeper into the woods, and how he would escape unnoticed. The more he thought about it, the more precise his plan became. Meanwhile, Radhika remained unaware of the storm growing inside him. She thought Arjun's recent quietness meant he was slowly adjusting to their new life. She noticed him being more attentive in small ways, asking about her day or suggesting they spend time together. She welcomed these gestures, believing they were signs that things were improving. She had no idea that each soft word he offered carried hidden intention. Arjun's mind had crossed a line he couldn't return from. What began as suspicion had evolved into a chilling plan shaped by jealousy, pride, and emotional desperation. He told himself that he was the victim, that his actions were justified, and that no one would ever understand the pain he had endured. As he waited for the right moment to carry out his plan, he felt a cold calmness settle within him, a calmness far more dangerous than his anger. The morning sun filtered through the apartment blinds as Radhika stretched and prepared for the day. Arjun had suggested a hike, framing it as a way to reconnect and spend time together after weeks of tension. Radhika hesitated for a moment, remembering his distant behavior, but the idea of a quiet trail away from the city sounded appealing. She packed water, snacks, and a small first aid kit, hoping that the simple escape would help them both. She didn't question why Arjun seemed so eager, assuming that he genuinely wanted to spend time with her. The drive to the trail was quiet. Radhika noticed Arjun's unusually calm demeanor, which contrasted sharply with the tension she had sensed over the past weeks. He spoke little, only pointing out landmarks or making casual remarks about the city. Radhika interpreted it as a sign that he had reflected and wanted to mend the emotional distance between them. She felt a cautious hope blossom inside her, unaware that every step closer to the trail was a step deeper into danger. The trail itself was secluded, surrounded by dense trees whose shadows stretched across the narrow path. Birds chirped intermittently, and a faint breeze rustled the leaves, creating a deceptive sense of serenity. Radhika admired the beauty, taking deep breaths and letting the calmness wash over her. She assumed that Arjun felt the same way and that perhaps this hike would be a turning point for their marriage. As they walked further, the path narrowed, and the noises of the city faded completely. Radhika noticed Arjun slowing down, glancing around as though evaluating something. At first, she thought he was simply enjoying the quiet, but then she sensed an intensity in his gaze that made her uneasy. Her mind flickered with questions, but she dismissed them, attributing it to overthinking. Suddenly, Arjun stopped and turned toward her. His eyes were fixed, unwavering, and in that instant, Radhika felt a flicker of fear. He spoke sharply, accusing her of betrayal, listing moments she thought he had never noticed. The word struck like a whip, freezing her in place. Confusion and shock clouded her mind. She tried to respond, to explain, but every attempt was cut short by the overwhelming force of his anger. Panic rose in her chest as she realized the hike was no longer an innocent outing. The trail felt narrower, the shadows longer, and the isolation suffocating. She tried to step back, to retreat, but Arjun advanced, his movements swift and precise. The quiet serenity of the forest was shattered by the sudden confrontation, and the knife he had hidden in his jacket gleamed in the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. The struggle was brief, but terrifying. Fear surged through Radhika's body as she fought to escape, realizing the depth of Arjun's rage and the danger she faced. The sounds of snapping twigs and rustling leaves echoed around them, but there was no one nearby to help. Arjun's hands were firm, his eyes cold, and for a moment it seemed like the forest itself had trapped her. By the time it was over, the trail was silent again. Arjun stepped back, leaving her on the ground, battered and gasping for air. The peaceful hike had transformed into a nightmare in the span of minutes. Arjun fled into the trees, convinced he had erased every trace of his actions. Radhika lay there, barely conscious, her mind struggling to comprehend the betrayal, fear and pain she had just endured. The forest, once inviting and serene, had become a witness to the darkest turn of their lives. Radhika never arrived at the coffee shop that afternoon. Kunal waited, growing increasingly concerned as the minutes stretched into hours. At first, he thought she might have been delayed by work or errands, but a sense of unease gnawed at him. She always kept to her routine, and her sudden disappearance felt unnatural. He tried calling her several times, but the phone went straight to voicemail. Panic began to rise, and the calm sense of companionship they had shared was replaced by dread. He remembered the hiking trail Radhika had once mentioned for weekend walks. It was quiet, secluded, and a place she often went when she wanted to clear her mind. A sinking feeling told him that something was wrong. Without hesitation, Kunal grabbed his jacket and rushed toward the trail, ignoring the growing tension in his chest. Every step he took was driven by fear, but he pushed forward, hoping against hope that Radhika was safe. Arriving at the trail, Kunal's eyes scanned the dense trees and narrow paths. He called her name softly at first, then louder as the fear in his voice grew. There was no response. He pulled out the hiking location tracker she had shared with him for safety weeks earlier. His heart pounded when the map revealed her last location deep along the trail. It was a small dot, nearly invisible, but it confirmed his worst fears. She had been there and she hadn't moved in a while. Kunal ran, following the tracker's direction, his mind racing with possibilities. When he rounded a bend, he saw her lying on the ground, barely conscious, her clothes torn and face bruised. The sight made his stomach churn, but he didn't hesitate. He rushed to her side, checking for signs of life. She was breathing, though weakly, and that small, fragile fact filled him with determination. He knew he had to act quickly before anyone could harm her further. He used his phone to call emergency services, explaining the situation with urgency. While waiting for help to arrive, he did everything he could to keep her conscious and calm. He lifted her head gently, spoke softly, and reminded her to stay awake. Each passing minute was agonizing. He couldn't believe that someone she trusted, someone she had built a life with, had turned against her. The betrayal stung even more than the physical injuries she had endured. When the paramedics arrived, Kunal guided them carefully, explaining what had happened and providing the location coordinates. Radhika was loaded onto a stretcher and rushed to the nearest hospital. Kunal followed closely, refusing to leave her side. The doctors worked quickly to stabilize her, and for the first time since she was found, there was a sense of hope. She had survived, and though the road to recovery would be long, she was alive. Meanwhile, authorities began piecing together what had occurred. The evidence left behind, the knife, the trail marks, and fingerprints, pointed directly to Arjun. His careful plan had collapsed in an instant, undone by the very person he had underestimated. Arjun was arrested at his apartment, shocked that his calculated actions had failed and that Radhika had survived. The quiet forest trail had become the scene of a terrifying revelation. What seemed like an ordinary day of hiking had transformed into a pivotal moment that saved Radhika's life and exposed the dangerous consequences of jealousy, secrecy, and obsession. The story, which had begun with small suspicions, had escalated into a confrontation that could have ended in tragedy if not for Kunal's quick action and unwavering attention to her safety. The aftermath of the attack left a heavy silence over Radhika's life. In the hospital, doctors worked tirelessly to repair the physical damage, but the emotional scars ran deeper than any wound they could stitch. The bruises on her body faded with time, but the memories of betrayal, fear, and near-death experience lingered, haunting her thoughts long after she returned home. Each sound outside, each sudden knock, reminded her of how quickly life could turn dangerous and how trust could be shattered in an instant. Arjun's arrest came swiftly. The police had gathered enough evidence from the trail, the weapon, and the digital footprint he had left behind to ensure there was no room for doubt. His carefully constructed plan, meant to erase Radhika from existence, had instead placed him directly into the hands of justice. At the station, he seemed calm, almost numb, unable to fully comprehend how quickly his life had unraveled. His arrogance and obsession with control had blinded him, leaving a trail of proof that even he could not deny. In court, the details of the attack shocked the community. Radhika's story, along with Kunal's testimony and forensic evidence, painted a chilling picture of jealousy taken to its extreme. The judge listened carefully, and the jury saw the full scope of Arjun's premeditated actions. His defense of temporary rage and emotional instability failed to sway anyone. Arjun was sentenced to decades in prison, ensuring he could no longer threaten or manipulate Radhika's life. The legal outcome brought a sense of relief, but it could not erase the trauma she had endured. Radhika, however, began the long process of rebuilding herself. She moved to a new apartment, changed routines, and focused on healing her mind and body. Therapy helped her navigate the intense feelings of fear, anger, and mistrust that lingered. Slowly, she found strength and independence and learned to redefine her life on her own terms. The process was neither quick nor easy, but each small step forward reminded her that survival was only the beginning of recovery. Her relationship with Kunal remained a complicated memory. He had saved her life, and she would always be grateful, but she chose to step away from both men to focus solely on herself. The experience had taught her the danger of emotional dependency and the importance of maintaining boundaries. She channeled her energy into her career, hobbies, and friendships, building a life that prioritized her safety and well-being above all else. The case became a cautionary tale for the wider community. It was shared in local news outlets, forums, social groups, emphasizing how unchecked jealousy and secrecy can escalate into life-threatening situations. People were reminded that emotional neglect, suspicion, and obsession, left unaddressed, could turn ordinary relationships into dangerous battlegrounds. For Radhika, the story ended not with fear, but with resilience. She survived an attack that could have claimed her life, faced betrayal from someone she trusted, and emerged stronger. Though the trauma remained, she reclaimed her sense of agency, proving that even in the darkest moments, courage and careful choices could lead to survival and eventual freedom. Her story became a lasting warning, a tale of how hidden emotions, when left unchecked, could escalate to unimaginable extremes, but also a testament to the power of resilience and the human spirit to recover.